Hey everybody, I'm Dan Lapel from New Focus Recordings, and hope everybody's doing well. Really happy to be joined here by composer Eric Lyon and string noise Pauline Kim Harris and Conrad Harris. Welcome, guys. Thanks for hopping on Zoom.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So this is a really exciting week for all of us. We have the release of the Giga Concerto coming out on Friday. That's part of an extravaganza of 3 albums that String Noise is putting out. Also on Infrequent Seams, and what's the third label that is involved?
Chaikin,
right? Yeah. So
Brian Chase
super exciting, super courageous to take on something like that. To put out 3 albums in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, you guys deserve a Purple Heart.
So we're having triplets.
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
Yeah. And this was a really cool project. The sort of centerpiece is the Giga Concerto that Eric Lyon wrote originally for you guys with the String Orchestra of Brooklyn, and then it got rearranged in this version with the International Contemporary Ensemble. Nick DeMaison did a great job conducting, and we went into Octave and Audio with Ryan Strieber and recorded that. That must have been like a year and a half ago now, maybe like summer of 2019 or something.
All in one day?
Yeah,
or
day.
Over the course of 2 days with the Brahms and everything.
Right,
yeah.
And then you guys followed up the next day and did a recording with amazing drummer Greg Saunier of Deerhoof, of these wonderful Brahms Opus 105 song arrangements that sort of take them and just totally turn them around like a prism and recontextualize them, and it just comes together as this very rich commentary on a lot of different things, on the repertoire, on sort of collage approaches. And so very cool. It's been great to get to know the album or the music both as a player but also later in a label capacity, and sort of to revisit it in the last several months. And before I forget, because I always forget, I want to make sure to shout out the great cover art was by Will Cotton, and you can see it behind me. And the design of the layout and the packaging was by Chippy Hung Chin. And I think I mentioned Ryan, and so we covered everybody important, hopefully. And so now I'm going to try to shut up for a second and let you guys talk maybe about the project in general, and then we'll hop into listening to some music. Eric, do you want to lead?
Where do we start?
Or Pauline, you can wherever you guys want to start. I mean,
no.
How did the Giga Concerto was the Giga Concerto the first project you guys did together, or were the Brahms songs the first thing, or was it something else?
I would say first of all that the Giga Concerto is one of a long line of collaborations between myself and Pauline and Conrad. We have a long and beautiful history together in various ways, both as soloists. In Conrad's case, our connection with the Bonk Festival in Tampa, but the String Noise project, I was really there for the beginning in 2011. And a little known fact is I actually bestowed the name on String Noise. So I guess in some way I'm your godfather.
Yeah, we haven't recovered from that yet.
No, not at all.
10 years in.
but the beautiful part about it, I mean, in some ways this goes we haven't discussed this yet, but this goes all the way back to my beginnings as a composer. So I started composing when I was 11. And the very first music I made was for 2 violins. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a secret I've kept. Now the world can know, because I actually started out as a violin. Well, a violinist might be too strong a word. I studied violin, but I did perform the one part of the Bach double concerto in junior high school. And that was about the time when I discovered that I was a composer. And so the very first time, yeah, right.
Yeah. So, I think while you were playing, you discovered you were actually composing.
Well, I think what happened was I discovered modern music. I discovered Paul Hindemith and Bartok and things like that, and that got me very excited. And I think about 11, and I was hearing music in my head. And at a certain point, was listening to some Hindemith. I thought, well, I could do that too. So I rushed up, into my room and got out some manuscript paper that I had, and I just started writing things. And I had I played violin, but I also had a tape recorder. So I wrote something for 2 violins, and I, played one part and recorded it, and I played the recording back and played the other part against. And I thought, that sounds really boss. So I'm going to do more of that. And that.
Hey, Eric,
thanks for joining.
Eric, do you still have that recording that you made when you were 11 of your duo?
If I did, I used to tell my PhD students back in Belfast that if Facebook existed when I was their age, I would be totally unemployable. And I think the same goes for that recording.
The same goes for a lot of people, I think.
Oh, no question. But I think this was very much inspired by Paul Hindemith's craft of musical composition. So I think there were a lot of these harmonic patterns that work with harmonic flux. It's kind of a fascinating book in a way. There are a bunch of volumes, but it's volume 3 that really did it for me. But I mean, getting back to the Giga Concerto, so that's actually started about halfway through our 10-year thing, because in 2015, that's when I was thinking, okay, we need to take this to the next level. I need to make a concerto for Conrad. And
I just thought you were absolutely crazy. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, well, this is okay, but this is Pauline. It's like that's her first step. This is absolutely crazy, and 30 seconds later, let's do this. How are we going to do this? Let's find an orchestra, and then she's immediately going through her Rolodex. So
no way. No, but like the fact that like we recorded this at Octavia with Ryan and with International Contemporary Ensemble on New Focus recordings, like, I don't know, like, you can't plan this stuff. I'm sorry, like, this is like the most amazing thing ever. Like,
yeah, but a Rolodex may have been involved.
No, it's like a Rolodex. Like, what Rolodex? No.
Pauline's Rolodex is just frankly scary.
This is not like, no.
But I want to respond to that, because you can't predict this is, I think, absolutely right, because we had a conception that really evolved in a couple of ways. Because my initial plan for this, we started out, I mean, I made this piece, the Noise Triptych, but then I very shortly after that started arranging punk rock songs for them. Like we did Lexicon Devil by the Germs, and then for some reason I had confused that with Gimme 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 by Black Flag, so I arranged that too. Yeah. But in the middle of that arrangement, I put in Gimme 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 A Man After Midnight by ABBA. So I think that might be the only arrangement of Black Flag that actually has ABBA in the center of it.
I think that's safe to say. I'm pretty sure that's pretty safe to say.
But I was doing these really fast songs, and going back to the point that everything I ever wrote for string noise, no matter how unreasonable, they would just play it down. And so I got used to the fact that just write anything, they can do it. And
don't share that with the world, Oh,
that is
that is not a useful piece of information for most of humanity.
No, we're talking about, again, this strange world that we inhabit. But I wanted to write for them the fastest double concerto ever. That was my plan. And so we started talking about that, and then started to talking about, well, we could do it with this group or this group. And then out of nowhere, we get commissioned by the String Orchestra of Brooklyn, which has this beautiful, lush, Montevani 1001 sound. There's no way you can do the fastest double concerto ever. It's just not the right venue. And so it became something else. And then while it was becoming something else, two things happened. One, the Donald Trump effect, because I'm composing this thing, and then Donald Trump gets into this tweet-a-thon with Kim Jong-un, where each of them is threatening each other with, nuclear attack, and they're talking about their buttons. And so I thought, okay, buttons. Well, there's a song by the Pussycat Dolls called Buttons. Maybe I could quote that. And so pretty soon, I'm just quoting all these nuclear war songs because the situation is just some combination of horrific and totally hilarious.
Yeah.
At the At the same time that happens, there's a loft concert in Tribeca where this gentleman, Greg Saunier, shows up, and I
was invited. I didn't just show up. We had some rehearsals.
Greg doesn't just show up. He becomes the life of the party. Necessarily.
There were many emails exchanged.
Were there?
Okay.
Yes.
But anyhow, from my perspective, I showed up for this loft concert and there was Greg, and I had done just almost kind of like as a toss-off, I took one of the Brahms Opus 105 songs, V Melodium, a song that I love. But again, my rule for Brahms is if we're going to do a string noise version, it has to go twice as fast as the original, and which happened. But then there was Greg at this loft party with his drums, and he was sitting in, and what he contributed to my arrangement, I can't even put into words. It was an ecstatic and peak musical experience for me. What you did, Greg, I mean, it was an act of musical genius that just threw me, it threw me back to rethink everything.
He had already thrown us in the closet at that point. You know that, right, Eric?
I do know that.
Yeah, we had recorded, so there was
he had already thrown us in a closet.
And, but I mean, I suppose that in the same way that, Eric, for you, having string noise to write for was a game changer or a rule changer, or where the normal restrictions. Well, wait, what if the restrictions are lifted? What if I don't need to be reasonable? What if I don't need to be respectful? What if I don't need to be reverent to technical limitations or traditions? And I found, that when Conrad and Pauline wanted to ask me to help them record those punk rock covers, and then what ended up being the one Brahms cover, I think once I heard them, I felt a similar restriction being lifted, because I realized the level of irreverence and humor contained in the composition, I felt made me free to make suggestions that I might have been shy to make in other circumstances. So, for instance, every violin playing classical friend I'd ever met in the many years of living in New York was always like, well, should I record my Bach cycle in a church or in a big concert hall, and I can't make up my mind. I'm like, you should be recording it, as like close up as possible. And I wanted to suggest that part of I'd played with string noise in concert one or two times before this happened, but my feeling was it was always sounding too far away. And part of the energy, whether it's inadvertent or not, but when you listen to the Germs or you listen to Minutemen or you listen to Black Flag, the rawness of the recordings, a great deal of what makes it sound so raw is that it's not in a large space, and it isn't overproduced. It doesn't have a big sonic image. You know, everything is right in your face, and like you know, the band is just right in front of you, and it's extremely aggro. And so, you know, I thought that it would be cool to, first of all, I was trying to think of what's the least echoey, you know, tiniest room that we could do it. And I had a walk-in closet at the time. I'm like, you guys are going in there. And then they said yes, which was the biggest surprise of all. But then what you have not mentioned is one of these arrangements. Okay, you got the Germs, you've got Black Flag, you've got the Minutemen, and then you had my band. You had arranged.
Oh,
and I felt.
Oh, did we forget to tell you about that?
Surprise!
Actually, it wasn't my composition. It was my bandmate's composition. It was Satomi and Chris Cohen wrote that song. But still, it was my band. And when they came in and they showed me this thing, I'm looking at this piece of paper, and you had some of the notes wrong. I felt like, you know what I'm going to do? Hey guys, that C is supposed to be a B flat or whatever it was. And I felt okay. I felt okay to change it. I hadn't met you yet, but I just felt a spiritual, I guess, assumption that you were going to be okay if I started messing with it, you know? And then they did the Brahms. That was the last thing that was recorded for that 7-inch. And at that point I felt, you know, a certain, you know, what was first felt like, you know, foolhardiness had developed over a few days into, you know, some confidence that me and Pauline Conrad together were coming up with good ideas for how to play or how to record these songs, even if I wasn't playing, just that I would give them suggestions on things. And with the Brahms, you know, it basically was like the more tumultuous and kind of free tempo they were doing it, the better I thought it sounded. So I was trying to encourage them to be more cavalier about ensemble or about, you know, I mean, that's the beauty of only 2 instruments is that it's not like if the whole, you know, orchestra falls, it's not like if Mantovani falls apart. That's not a good example because they probably do fall apart. It's so slow, it doesn't matter. But
it would probably sound good that way too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's kind of
it probably
Mantovani
sounds
sound,
really good.
actually, if you think about it. But anyway, just like take greater risk, you know, with tempo and with dynamics, and not even just with dynamics, but with spontaneity. So dynamics that are not written on the page, but that anybody might feel at any moment. And with recording, it's easy because you can always do another take. So, hey guys, just go wild, you know, do whatever it comes. And then we kind of edited together the best parts. But then once we had the finished thing, we were like, this sounds pretty insane and really cool. And so then that experience of having felt somewhat welcome to participate in messing around with your arrangements led to a general attitude while performing of just being very loose and very irreverent and not worrying too much about it being precise, you know. You know, so that made it really fun, and I think it makes it a nice contrast to Giga Concerto, which requires extreme, you know, precision and exactitude, and there's a lot of 16th notes that have to be perfectly in sync, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, I'm so happy that you mentioned that about being able to go into the arrangement and say, no, that note's wrong, I'm going to fix that around. Because here's the thing about arrangement, or the way I feel about it, is I only arrange songs that I love and think that they're in a way perfect. Exactly. Whether it's Panda 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 or you know, V Melodian, right? It's perfect. the way it was, whether it was notated by the composer or the way that you recorded it. So I always seriously screw around with the piece, because I don't want to slavishly, so if when you listen to the Brahms arrangements, there are a lot of notes in my arrangements that aren't remotely what Brahms wrote. And he wasn't able to call me on it the way you did with the Deerhoof song. But no, I don't think I've ever written a note perfect arrangement, for the reason that I feel like if I'm doing an arrangement, it's really kind of like my love letter to the original. It's always done with respect, and it's always like, what would be another way of doing it? But that score then, as you intuited absolutely correctly, Greg, is not the final word in any way. It opens it up to a further conversation.
It's a conversation. So, I mean, if you think of what a love letter is, it's a conversation. You want to respond. So Brahms can't respond, like you said, but as much as possible that it's opening up a thing, where the other person may then respond.
And also, string noise, very often, I would say almost as a rule, they play my arrangements different than how I write them, and it's perfectly fine because I mean they're such creative musicians that when they make changes in the score, it's almost, I wouldn't say almost, it's always an improvement. It's their interpretation. And what I love about it, there used to be this idea in a way of a distinction between what the composer writes on a score as being sacrosanct, and that the space, and the space for interpretation for the musician is you can do everything as long as you play those notes correctly. But I think that also represents an older version of music that's sort of pre-recording technology. I think that this is also why classical music, in a way, is so different than jazz, because so much of the history of European classical music predated the development of reproducing recording technology, which is from the late 19th century. But if you see in jazz, the idea of a note perfect replication of somebody else's performance, no, it's different. And so I think in a way, string noise takes us to that space where the musicians, the performers, get to change things because they know what's right in the moment.
Yeah, that's what makes it, all the more interesting, is to mess around with the arrangements. And like, we do that, just the two of us too, but when we started playing with Greg, you like put a comma there maybe, or just stop all of a sudden, like you put on the brakes and then fall back in, and the tempo, it doesn't have to be quite together, and the tempo can change every 3 notes.
There's a very, very odd thing that I think relates to what Eric was just talking about, which is that when you listen to historical recordings of classical performances in the early days of recording, the early virtuosos, and it's when recording was just barely invented, but edits had not been invented. You listen to it, you cannot believe the rubato, and you cannot believe the variations in intonation, and you can't believe how much faster this person is playing than that person, and they just keep going, and they're just off, and they're just like into it. You hear the joy of it, and one thing that recording has done, I mean, obviously it's exacerbated when you talk about pieces that have multiple recordings, and you talk about the canon, and you talk about the most famous pieces of classical music, that may have hundreds of recordings at this point. It's like, I mean, the pressure for precision, it's like the only reason to make another recording appears to be to make an even more perfect edit of it, And so it's like, I don't know. It's like there's something rebellious that I really relate to in almost taking inspiration from the early history of recorded classical music, those virtuosos, and how wild their performances sound in comparison with what's demanded of performers nowadays.
Mm.
Yeah.
Should we listen?
Because the thing is, it actually sounds better. It sounds like incredibly exciting, you know, when it's like, I don't know, you know, whatever examples that, you know, of just, you get, they were just so much more eccentric, I guess, you know, when you think of, I don't know, I mean, some of them had long careers and their careers lasted into more of the, you know, the later stages of recording. But when you hear their early recordings, it's hard to believe. I don't know. I think of like Cortot or Schnabel or
Schnabel, yeah, for sure.
Or like the early
Yeah,
recordings of
such
like
eccentric.
Chrysler and yeah.
Yeah. Who are the violin players from that era? Who was the one who always played with Cortot? I forget.
Well, wasn't it like
You're right. There was
Cortot,
Chrysler.
yeah. And he went by a different name. That's like as a
Well,
composer.
exactly. His name was Antonio Vivaldi. Remember, he went by that name. He wrote fake Vivaldi music. Remember, that was a big part of his repertoire. He wrote fake Vivaldi pieces.
But this Giga Concerto is a high point. It's a peak experience because it brought.
Should we talk about it?
How about we listen to some of it? What do you think?
Okay. Sure.
Maybe the one from the second movement, because you mentioned the Pussycat Dolls and the Elton John.
That's the one where everything changed. Let's go with that.
That's the one that really signaled the transformation. So here we go. We're going to check out an excerpt from movement 2 of the Giga Concerto.
Wow,
that was quick.
That was
really quick.
Excerpt from movement 2.
We did. We played that fast.
It was extremely fast. Eric, give us the dirt on this one.
The dirt. Okay, well, so first of all, I had already completed the first movement where this Twitter war broke out between Trump and Kim Jong-un. I have to say that, you know, I had written actually the year before I wrote this concerto, a book chapter on called On Antiviral Music. And it was really, the argument was that, first of all, we were living in an internet world, and something that you had talked about, Dan, about everything being available now, that there's this radical proximity on YouTube. You can listen to anything and then find anything else, no matter how obscure. And I got really interested in the pieces, the tracks on YouTube that had 10 listens. For whatever reason, it seemed to me like there was, in a way, a recapturing of what Walter Benjamin talked about as the aura in his essay, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. Because just recently, I checked out the hit song "Call Me Maybe," Carlo Ray Jefferson, which I think is a brilliant piece of music. I went to it, it's had 1.2 billion hits. And that was just on that one track. That's what virality works like. But the thing is, if you listen to that, your listening to it does not in any way impact what the ontology of that thing. But if you go to something that, for whatever reason, is in some dark corner of the internet, but somebody put it on YouTube for some reason. In some cases, it wasn't even the person who made the artwork. In some cases, you have no idea what it's doing there. And so I said, okay, in order to talk about the antiviral nature of this music, there's never any ads there. There doesn't seem to be much context. Let's talk about virality. And so I talked a little bit about Trump and the importance of trolling. In other words, doing something really, really outrageous and upsetting and attention catching. So I actually had a section in this so far unpublished chapter called Twitter, Capital of the 21st Century. And that was a shout out to Walter Benjamin's, I think it was an essay called Paris, Capital of the 19th Century. So I said, look, the thing about Twitter, it's not the social media platform that has the most, highest membership. That at the time, and maybe still, was Facebook. But this is the platform that is most amenable to trolling. And I said that for that reason, Twitter really is the capital of the 21st century. And then you have two heads of state trolling each other with nuclear war threats. And the thing is, we should be very afraid of nuclear war. I mean, it is a truly frightening thing, and it's a possible thing. It's entirely possible just by accident that you could wind up in a nuclear war situation that
and narrowly prevented many times.
Narrowly, exactly, Greg. And so I was thinking, okay, you got this thing that's horrific, but it's also kind of hilarious because Trump, for everything else that he was an entertainer. And even now, so I mean, he's writing things in this, when after Kim Jong-un called him a dotard, he said, Kim Jong-un said that I'm old. I would never say that he's short and fat. I want to be his friend, and I hope it will happen someday. And he'll say things, he would say things like, Kim Jong-un is talking about the button that's always on his desk. Well, I have a bigger button on my button. My button actually works. So I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is a new chapter in the rhetoric of the United States president. And here's, in the end, Trump was canceled by Twitter. He was deplatformed, which I think is, another really interesting fact, a footnote to this whole conversation. But this thing happened. So I said, okay, Trump is calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man. So of course I had to quote Rocket Man by Elton John. But I mean, there were all these kinds of references, and it was this kind of two levels, this level of everybody is terrified of nuclear war at some level, but we don't really want to admit it. We'd like to think, oh, it's contained, not going to happen. It could happen. And I don't know, I don't see anybody doing anything really to try to, stop it at a point. So there is that level of ambient terror that we all have, I think. And then there's this other level of, this is freaking hilarious. And this is, I mean, in a way, I think that's how Trump got elected. He got elected by being entertaining. And
I think it's more subtle than entertainment. But I do think it relates to exactly what you're saying. I think that it's, it appears to be a new chapter in rhetoric from heads of state. In fact, it's the same rhetoric as it's always been from heads of state, but it's simply revealed. The screen is pulled away, and you realize that the real conversation that had been happening all of these centuries was not what was contained in the words, but between the lines, it's about impunity for being infantile, basically, or for being, just an immature man, or basically, I would say that, and that it is both horrifying and hilarious. And although Trump may have been good, and others are good at exploiting that for entertainment value, it's funny even if Trump didn't realize it was funny, even if he wasn't trying to be entertaining. It's sort of like you have a nervous laughter because you realize, wait a second, we're being led by dodos and never have not been, or it's not even about intelligence, I should say. It's more just about a leader thinks that they're above any need to follow any kind of protocol or any kind of moral code, you know. So, and it became obvious somehow. I mean, in a way, that's why he got deplatformed.
I couldn't agree
he had
more.
a nuclear. It was when he didn't have access to the button anymore that suddenly he gets deplatformed. I mean, that proves it for you. The problem was that he exposed too much of what political rhetoric really is under the surface. It was never about the fact that he had the button. Jack Dorsey was fine that a guy was threatening the termination of the human race. That was not a problem for Twitter. But if he's going to expose the fact that leaders are idiots, then that's too much.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. The thing about Trump is he said the quiet things loud. He
Exactly.
screamed them into a megaphone. And in a way, it was really kind of, to me, an intersection between that power that you're talking about, Greg, and the sense of entitlement that I think comes with a certain sector of the morbidly wealthy one percenters, if you could, because I mean, Trump saying I could shoot someone in Fifth Avenue and still get elected, that sense of entitlement is where it was about. And so, you know, they do their job. We as artists do a job with, I think, a different kind of power. But, you know, I think a lot about an amazing passage in The Twilight of the Idols by Friedrich Nietzsche. It was written in the late 1880s. Not Nietzsche in the 1980s, like it's hard to imagine. But he basically said he had this passage called "What the Germans Lack," and no disrespect to my many German friends, because this was written a long time ago. But he says basically, coming to power is very dangerous. Power makes stupid. And he talks about, you know, the German nation. He says once the Germans were considered the nation of thinkers, but do they think anymore? And he feared that Deutschland über alles was the death of German philosophy, which was, you know, more true than he could have even imagined. And that, I love that too, because I think Nietzsche is one of the few philosophers who really would have worked on Twitter, because a lot of his writing is basically pure trolling. You read The Will to Power, and it's like, that would work as a tweet. That would work as a tweet. That would really get some people upset. That gets me upset.
Yeah, totally. Do you think that your piece has any of that quality? I mean, it's not just the fact that you're using quotations that are often brief, but it's also the way it's sort of like your phrase structure, your period structure does seem to work in these sort of bursts, you know, of ideas, much more than sort of like the long, slowly developing, you know, romantic ideal of the slow movement or something. It's like this stuff is fast, it goes by fast, you blink and you miss it, you know, there's like a lot of information, and it does have a somewhat, I wouldn't say Twitter, but, you know, things are happening in kernels, you know, or something, cells, or brief passages one after another, you know, each of which is very powerful on its own, or very funny on its own, or very touching, you know.
Yeah, I think, you know, that idea of these little nuggets is absolutely there. The weird thing to me is there are so many references. I mean, you could write a lot of footnotes to this, which is kind of funny in a way since I'm an academic, right? But when I listen to the piece, I don't hear it that way, but every so often. So for example, in the last movement, there's a legit cadenza for the two violins. Right before it is this big honking 1-6-4 chord.
Right.
If you ever listen to like Mozart concerto,
it's always, that's the last chord before the
always get the 1-6-4 chord, because it's like, okay, this is the preparation for the final cadence, and now that gives us license for this big old thing that doesn't advance the tonal argument in any way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about the virtuosity. And I'm sorry, but how many 20th or 21st century atonal concerti, are you going to hear a 1/6/4 chord?
You win the prize, Eric.
Not a lot.
So that's what that was. Okay, now I know. Thank you. That's why I was reacting. I had the, like, oh, okay. Watch out, here we come.
I think there's a lot of things where it's like, oh, that was that. Like when you have that rhythm, ba 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 ba, that comes from Total Destruction, the only solution. Like reflects on a sampling, not a sampling, not of the music, but of the text from Bob Marley's song "Real Situation," and that was just like this screaming noise thing made by DJ Scud called Total Destruction. But the song "Real Situation" by Bob Marley is extraordinary. And
I mean, this is the really wild thing about like being on the other side of it, where like I didn't know any of this. Like I'm just like learning the notes, and we're like doing this thing. I'm like, what? Like they're like quotes and Easter eggs, and what am I hunting here? What's going on? And
there are a lot of songs that I didn't know in the concerto. There were I mean, I didn't listen much to Elton John before, but of course I knew Rocket Man. I mean, everyone knows Rocket Man.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's certain things you just know, but
right. The Pussycat Dolls, and what's the one that has the melody? Da, 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 dee, da, dee, da, da, da.
That's Pussycat Dolls.
Oh, that is Pussycat Dolls.
Oh, that is. Okay, see?
No, what's the what's the name of the song?
I'm like
that. Okay, that was funny. I listened to it after we recorded it, and I was like, oh, I guess he said that this song is in there somewhere, and I heard the melody. I was like, oh, really? I couldn't, I don't know. I'm kind of glad that I didn't maybe hear it before. I'm glad to hear it, and I liked it, but I don't feel bad that I didn't listen to it before, because it might have interfered with my interpretation of that line.
If there was a reference in the first movement, it's a little bit obscure, but it would be it was very much about exploring the motion from stability to chaos, because that really seemed to be almost a kind of political structure that people got really interested in, I think, in the early part of the 21st century, which is that I think, chaos theory kind of became a big thing in the 1980s, and everything becomes weaponized. And so I think by the early 21st century, people were looking at ways to kind of destabilize, use that. So as a political strategy. So I basically was very interested in creating this very rigid thing, and it goes.
Where does the flamenco come in, though? Like when Dan LaPelle takes it away with the flamenco.
Oh, that's in a different movement. That rhythm, that's a reference to Sun Ra saying nuclear war in his song Nuclear War. So I did da-da-da-da. I just took the rhythm from that melody. So that's a reference too.
Wait, Dan, did you know that?
No, I didn't know that until after. I didn't know that.
No way.
I didn't either.
Also,
I didn't know.
Like that's like a bit of a sort of not cliche, but it's like a sort of flamenco trope also, like to have this punctuated like.
I know the way. I mean, like in the Extraction video where you're like your fingers you're really demonstrating how you. But it's like really effective. Like it's really great.
It's
I was just like that.
It's sort of a standard. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
It's just a party trick, but it's not a unique one.
No, it was amazing. It was just, oh my God.
It's like playing the piano backwards.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's
But
just-
you know, so that first movement, that gradual transition where you have this I was really thinking, I think, a little bit about the transitions from order to chaos in the Beatles song Day in Life, where you have the piano just hammering, and as it turns out, it's the same note. That's also on E, where they've just got that thing happening, and then gradually the orchestra starts moving. Now there's more of a trajectory there, whereas here this the chaos turns on itself in that movement. But I think there is that in reference.
Congratulations again. It's been a pleasure. And to the folks who stuck with this YouTube Zoom thing, this is FCR 293, string noise, Eric Lyon, Greg Saunier, International Contemporary Ensemble, Nick DeMaison conducting. You can find it all the places that you would pay or not pay for music, and a real pleasure. So everybody check out the music, and
Thank you
we'll
very much.
see you back online soon.